Welcome to the Racers Roundtable, a podcast sponsored by the Eastern Museum of Motor Racing, where history meets horsepower and legends live on. Each episode brings together voices from across the motorsports world, from grassroots heroes to seasoned veterans, as they share stories, insights, and behind-the-scenes tales that shaped their racing journeys. Whether you're a diehard fan of dirt tracks, drag strips, or open-wheel icons, the Racers Roundtable is your seat at the table for candid conversations and timeless memories from those who lived it. Strap in tight because it's time to talk racing history one lap at a time.
I want to introduce our panel here. I guess I'll start to the right here. Thelma Hall, and she's going to tell us stories about the good old days. Then we got Fred Bear. Now everybody knows Freddie because he's old as dirt. And next to him is Thelma's son Ken. Now Ken is a twin, the Michael and Ken, but Michael couldn't come today because of work issues. Next to me is none other than Greg Swenson. He's a local guy. He's got the car out there. And on the end is another old guy like me. That's Ken Bingham. We're going to start this way, and then I'm going to have the guys talk about the cars, where they got them, and the history of them. I just want you to all know, I talked to Fred at Bruce Larson's Drag Fest. He said, you ought to have Gene Altizer's car up in the museum. I said, yeah, I ought to. And he said, well, I have it, he said. So over the course of the end of the year and the beginning, we talked back and forth and decided we had room for it. We wanted to do it. We were going to go with this theme or topic. And I want you to all know that Fred brought the car from Florida. Give him a hand. He hauled it up. And when we originally made the arrangements, he was going to bring it up last week, and then light come on. I said, well, why don't you bring it up like the Friday before our open house, and then you can hang around and talk on the panel. So that's what we did. So we got Fred to thank for that car being here, which was a very, very famous car in the East Coast, and I'm just so tickled to have it. In the meantime, I want to thank you all for coming out and sticking around. This is going to be exciting. Fred, tell us about the origin of the gasser class.
It kind of evolved as the sport evolved in the early 50s, and it became obvious that some cars were completely stock, some of us weren't. So it really wasn't fair if everything was heads up. A Christmas tree was something that showed up in your house once a year. So they started a modified class, which suddenly people's like, what's that guy from Florida? Garbage. He started, couldn't afford a whole car, so he started building little teeny things. Then that wasn't fair to run against him. So they started classes, and they got refined. When did we start modified production? I think early 60s.
Early 60s. Yeah.
Early 60s.
I still miss it.
Because now the gassers were race cars. They started out
They
to
had a class of
be
their own.
modified street cars. Now they weren't. So there was a void now between gassers, which are really race cars, and strictly stocks. So they did modified production, and depending on the track, but it was limited to 1 4-barrel, battery ignition, engine make for the body style, and it was fair rules. Boy, it was some badass cars at York in the highway classes back then.
I came on, I'm a little younger than you. I came on a little behind, but of course I looked at my Hot Rod magazine. To me, if you took the front bumper off, it became a gasser. Is that pretty true?
And a 3/4 cam, whatever a 3/4 cam is,
Means.
nobody
Nobody
ever explained that, because it seems like in a V8 only 12 valves would open and close if you had a 3/4 cam. Anyway, yeah, you did that, and it just evolved, you know?
Yeah.
Something about drag racers have always wanted to go faster.
It's part of the
And
sport.
You take weight off the front end, it puts more traction on the rear tires. And then somebody figured out, well, let's move the engine back a little bit. And
Yep. So
that
that's for the weight
came to
over.
a new rule called 10%. So it all evolved. Thank God for a gentleman named Wally Parks that had the foresight to organize it.
If he'd only be
I
there
don't
now.
know where it would have gone. I don't know where NASCAR would never probably existed if it hadn't been for Mr. Bill France. I have the most respect in the world for those two gentlemen.
Gene Altheiser's car that Fred hauled up from Florida is down in our drag racing area. Behind it is a showcase with some of Gene's race pictures and some of the things. The intake down there, he was the first one to design that and figure it out, and everybody copied it because he didn't have time to patent it. So everybody else copied him. But it was a one-off deal down there, so it's in the showcase behind. So when you get done, you get intermission or something, be sure to go down and check that stuff because it's really neat, and I'm just so proud to have it and have the car here. I wish we could have Gene here, but he has health problems and he couldn't make the trip. Bill Klein brought us the archive stuff down there from his collection, which I didn't know Fred actually owns the car and maintains the car for Gene. So
The car wouldn't be here without Judy's help. She is the best help that I've ever had and works for less pay than anybody I've ever
and
had.
he needs a lot of help.
And puts up with me. The only person that's put up with me more than she has was my mother. May she rest in peace. And I think she died to get some rest. So thank you all for the applause for Judy. And if the car sparkles, you have to thank her because I don't clean cars, I paint them. She does a beautiful job. She spent 2 days cleaning Gene's car, inside, underneath, in the trunk. She cleaned everything in that car because it's going to the museum. I want it to look nice.
When it arrived, we were down there trying to get it positioned and set the stanchions up, and she was still polishing it. Sitting next to me is Ken Hall. He's one of the twins. I can't tell him, but he said he's Ken. The only way I know is I called Ken's phone number, so I think I got Ken. I'm going to let him talk a little bit. His mother's sitting down here. They were involved with the K.S. Pittman car, and I'm going to let him tell the whole story in the background and include your mother.
My father was Harry Hall. I was too young to be a part of that car. I was only 2 years old when he crashed that car at Englishtown. So it really doesn't have many memories in my mind, except probably my dad cursing that, he crashed his car. My father started out, he had his own cars. He was through Pontiac, worked for a dealership, and they gave him a car to race. Then he bought a 41 Willys and had a blown Oldsmobile in it. And he had help from a gentleman in the Bristol area named Jack Culp. I'm sure maybe Bruce had heard of him.
I remember Jack.
Yeah, you remember Jack? Well, Jack was very famous with engines, very good with Chryslers and Oldsmobiles. And in fact, KS would credit Jack Culp for teaching him how to tune those engines because Jack was a master with those engines. So my father started hanging around Culp's garage and then started driving Jack's. He had a Willys also. And then the bread truck that had a 392 in it, or Oldsmobile, then it went to a 92. So my father had his start through Jack Culp. When he got put into the Hall of Fame down in Carolina, he credited Jack Culp to a lot of it. And I wish my dad was still here to see this and be a part of this. It was a big part of his life growing up. Then he met KS. KS came east, had his Opel. No, he didn't have his Opel. He still had a 33, the steel one.
Steel 33.
Steel 33.
64.
Yeah. And my father met KS then and started hanging out with him, helping him, and they ran their cars together a lot of races. And then KS was selling the 33 Willys that the door is off of down here. And my father bought the KS car from him. And I still don't know the year. I asked my mom, and she didn't remember. We're guessing around 68, somewhere in there, maybe, Fred?
Well, the car was new in 7. Yeah, I think that was 68.
68.
That y'all bought.
Okay. And then KS built the Opel.
Right.
And then he had also the Austin, which was
The football car.
the football, which was Mazmanian's car.
Mazmanian's body.
Yep. So KS bought that. So they had a couple cars there floating around driving. But my dad primarily drove the KS car, which was, till the day he died, said it was his favorite car. He loved that car. It was beautiful. And the gentleman who painted that car, there's a great story. He told me that, which I laughed at every time he told me. Him and KS, when the car was brand new, brought out to Molly.
Yeah.
Molly was in Los Angeles. And Molly used to paint all the Hells Angels motorcycles. So my dad said, him and KS brought the car there. It's in gel coat. And they said, Molly came out and he was this hippie, like long hair, crazy looking. This is the 60s and this was just him. Painted a Hells Angels bike. So he looked like a Hells Angel. So he said, what do you want? KS said, I wanted orange, tangerine, and after that, and my name on it, you do what you want. So he said, come back in a week. They told me was Molly would push the car in his little garage he had, this one-car garage, and he would get stoned out of his mind, smoking pot, and he would paint these cars, and they looked incredible. So they said they went to his house a week later, they opened the garage door, all the smoke rolled out of the door, out comes Molly, he could hardly even see straight, and Dad said it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. But that was the neatest story, I thought, man. It's so, well, I have the nose piece of the car, I couldn't bring it today. It looks like a caveman coming at you, and it says paint by Molly, and that's how they got the car. But my dad drove the car for 4 years or so. He crashed it at Englishtown in '72 at the Summer Nationals, and I learned this after Doug Wood. There's a whole story behind that as well, but Doug is the reason why I have this. My family has a door today. But Brian was there at the track and was one of the first guys to my father when the car crashed at the end of the track, which I didn't know of. I just learned last year.
I bet he can't run that fast.
I said, well, what happened when he got to my dad? He says, I've never heard such foul language in my life. And he says, not because he was hurt, because the battery behind the seat was dripping ass all over, and he was telling me, just get me the hell out of this car. So I thought it was on fire. He said, no, it was no fire, just your dad in there cursing up a storm trying to get out of that car. Anyway, the front wheel broke off. He crashed the car. The door had gone out in the weeds. We got the door back a couple years ago. Doug Wood was a big ambassador. Getting that back for us is a big story. But Dad ran the 33. He ran against KS for years, and he was his teammate up until he crashed that car. He built a Vega, and that was blown 392 on gasoline. And to this day, my dad ran, I think it was Georgia. He ran and set the national record in blown gas and funny car, and a week later they switched into alcohol. So in my mind, my dad still has the record.
That makes sense.
You know, that's just how I look at it. Then he had the Vega, and we bought Brad Anderson's Dodge Dart and a couple cars from there. But just growing up, I know this car, the pictures you can see are of my dad in the car and driving it and getting to our back at Englishtown back in around 82. That car was his pride and joy. And to be a teammate with KS meant the world to him. KS was just one of the most flamboyant, fun, seemed calm, but Dad said he was just a piece of work. KS was hell with fireworks. He'd throw M80s at everything, didn't matter where you're at. Going through the Baltimore Harbor Tunnel, he'd throw a handful out the window at one time. Or Dad told me a story one time, he says, KS had a real southern drawl. He was from Texas, and he said to my dad, they were walking through Indy at the Nationals in like 68, 69, they were running the cars there. He walked by my dad, he says, Harry, how fast can you run? Dad said, I don't know, KS, how fast? You know, I want to test you now. Dad said, all right, well, let's go. There was a guy that KS hated, and he walked into one of the porta-johns there at the racetrack. So KS takes out two M80s out of his pocket, twists the fuse together, lights in the cigar, and drops in the vent tube. My dad says, I couldn't run any faster than I was. Get the hell out of there. He says, all I hear is this thud. This guy came out of the sink, covered head to toe with toilet paper, and he says, KS, he says, I don't know who's going to kill you worse, me or him. Let's get the hell out of here. But he says, we laugh so hard. But my mom can tell you stories, too, about his daughter. And
She's gonna.
oh, yeah, we're going to pass the mom now because she was there more than I was, you know. But the stories that I got from my dad were just awesome with KS. And like I said, that car was his favorite. He loved it. Built a 33 back in around 95, 96 with my family. It wasn't the same. It was a little lower. It wasn't like an old gasser. I wish we had done it different, but he said the same later. The 33s were his thing. And Rocky Perone owns a series of gassers. He owns a replica of the KS car, which is in museum in California. And he owns the Big John Masmanian 40. That's out there as well. And also a replica of his father's Boss Hydro 33. Which isn't home yet, yeah. So I was fortunate enough, I drove the Big John Masmani car. In fact, I drove it against Freddie Bear in the KS car at Budds Creek. The first time I ever drove the car, and Rocky's father-in-law has set the wheelie bars up a little higher, not thinking about it. When I left the line, the thing was really carrying the wheels out, and I didn't know any better. Just like driving a soup bowl down the track. I'm like, well, I guess this is how it's supposed to leave. I didn't know. I stayed in it. And then these guys get back there all applaud, going crazy. Well, we got to the end of the track, and you're sitting here now, and you'll agree with me. Fred Bear and I walked up to each other, and we both had tears in our eyes. And I said, man, that was for KS and my dad. And that was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I was honored to race against Fred Bear.
I was honored.
Oh, it meant the world to me. I haven't driven the KS car yet, and Rocky says before I die, he's going to let me make a pass in the KS car. My brother drove it many times. Fred's driven it. I think we all, it's like luggage. We just pass that thing around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. Anyway, so I've gotten a chance to drive these old cars, and my father was there when I drove a couple of them, and he told me the same thing. He says, they're just like they were back in the day. He says, be ready. They're a handful. Somewhere I have a picture of my dad of the KS car going through the lights at Maple Grove with the front wheels a foot in the air.
I've seen that picture.
Yep, and he used to tell me, he says, didn't no matter what you were doing,
Straight.
you'll be straight as an arrow, but you would just pick the front up out of nowhere, half track or finish line or whatever, and he said that thing was a lot of fun to drive. We were fortunate to go through it, to have KS in our life, and to have Freddie and everybody, and my mother got to be a part of that. I'm going to give her the microphone for a minute. I'm sure she'll have something to interject here and tell me where I screwed up and did something wrong. But thank you all for letting me come out and ramble on for a few minutes. And
Now, wait a minute. I got a Ken and Thelma story. We're at Beaver Springs, and I'm running you. I think you were in the KS car, or maybe the boss.
That was Mike.
Is that Mike?
Was Mike.
Okay. Well, how they look alike. I'm driving the KS car, and this is BJ. That's before Judy. And getting ready to make a run, and I said, Harry, how about towing me up with the Nomad? And he goes, what? And I says, I need somebody to tow me the Nomad and bring me back after the run. You know what I'm talking about. And he goes, you want me to? Yeah. Well, Harry was a big man, and it took a shoehorn to get him in the Nomad. And Thelma got in the right side, and they towed me up. And as well as I remember, I won. We get to the other end. Here comes down the return road. He's got a smile that you couldn't get out of the Nomad with him. It had to take the two out individually. Next run, he says, can I please tow you with my car? But that is my last good story of you and Harry together. I'll never forget it.
That was wonderful.
Thank you, Fred. Well, Mom, I know you've got probably something you could add to about the KS days or...
Oh, the KS days, they were fantastic. The one incident I remember very, very well, if KS was going to be running at Englishtown and Harry racing as well, he would normally stay at our home. And the one time when he was with us, he had brought his two daughters, Tammy and Debbie. Tammy was a her set with Linda Vaughn. And I can remember we were getting ready to go to Englishtown. Tammy was still in the house, trying to get ready to be her set. Tall boots up to her knees was part of her outfit. And we're all outside waiting for Tammy. And KS is going, Tammy, get out here. We're going to be late. Let's go, let's go. Tammy still wasn't coming out. He's still in. Tammy, we gotta go. Here comes Tammy running out of the house, had her tall boots on. They had laces that were unbelievable. Didn't have time to lace her shoes. So she's running across the lawn, holding on to her shoelaces with her boots on her feet, trying to run across the lawn. Well, we were rolling in stitches, laughing at her trying to come across the lawn. But it was just so funny to see her. We had a lot of good times with KS, his daughters, and with drag racing, the many friends that were like family to us, we're so thankful for. And today, I also want to thank, being that Mike could not be here today, his beautiful daughter, Tori, who is a successful dirt track racer, and also Allison, Ken's girlfriend. Thank you for being with us. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Thelma. I just wanted to throw a little word in here from my point of view. Many years ago, I guess 10, 12 years ago, before Ken's dad died, they had the race up at Beaver Springs after the York Muscle Car Mania, and they raced kind of as a booked-in circuit. His dad, I was really impressed when they staged the cars. The two crew people, with their dad at the time, pull the cars up, look at each other, and go like that before they went down with the race. And I thought, that is true sportsmanship. One didn't take off without the other or try to burn the other one down. They made sure they were ready to go, and away they went.
Well, what you didn't hear is my dad would be in the car before we'd stage, and he'd always give me words of advice like, don't be a dumbass. Or,
Turn the fuel pump
this
on.
crap better come home in one piece or I'm going to beat you to senseless, you know. So we always had some encouraging stories from my dad as I'm staging the car.
I only got to talk to KS one time in my life, and that was up in Carlisle, and I think the Good Guys were up there, which was probably 20 years ago. And he was there as a featured car and speaker and stuff, and I was listening to him. He said, we were really nuts driving cars with wheelbases of 90 inches. Just untamable, but that's what they did. That's the way it was. Stock frames, yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah, that was a stock frame car.
Yep. Incredible. I mean, they were men, so. Well, now I'm going to turn the microphone over to Greg here. Greg is a local guy, and I never, ever can remember the name of his car. What's it called? Hale.
No, actually, this car is Mickey Hale's old gasser, and he raced in the Ohio Outlaw Gassers circuit, which was sponsored by Scott Rods. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of the car, how I came to own it. But before I do any of that, I just want to make a shout out to Gene Altizer, and just to say that way back when Darwin Dahl had his events out there at the York Fairgrounds, Gene was at a couple of those events, and I remember his car was parked not too far from where we were parked. At the time, I was racing a little tube frame car. It was a 1987 Dodge Charger body sitting on a Alston Pro Gas chassis, and it was basically just looked like an old super gas car. Fun little car to drive. We were asked to come and join the show. Got a chance to meet and spend a good bit of time talking with Gene Altizer while we were there. A wonderful, wonderful person, and certainly he was, one of my heroes growing up. Certainly remember when he ran the Weasel at the first drag race I ever went to, which was the 1969 Superstock Nationals. They had that out at York, and he had the Corvair. At that point in time, he certainly became foremost in my attention, just getting a chance to see him as one of my heroes growing up, along with a guy sitting in the back of the room with a hat on there, Mr. Bruce Larson. My brother and I have a twin brother, Gary, and we both became sort of partners in crime with all this stuff.
See why I can't keep them straight? They're twins.
It was an interesting story that I'll just sort of share with you guys because it's sort of funny. But my brother and I, when we were about 10 years old, we were basically both really into like dinosaurs and snakes. And my father was an old machinist. He started his career as a tool and die maker. And he worked his way through manufacturing as the years went on. But when we were about 10 years old, we were on vacation, and my father was so sick and tired of hearing about dinosaurs and snakes that he walked into a magazine rack at a shopping center that we were at, and he picked out a copy of Popular Hot Rodding. It had Gas Ronda on the cover, an old funny car, and he basically said, I think it was a 1967 issue, and he gave it to my brother and I, and he said, "Here, read this." And we never stopped, much to his dismay, I think, in later years. But basically, that's how we really got interested in cars, and we both have continued in that vein ever since. Primarily started as spectators and then eventually got to get into collecting cars and racing and stuff like that. But I am just a local bracket racer. That's really, what I do. But I got into collecting some cars along the way and had a chance to drive a few of these things, which are very interesting. But again, I'd like to, shout out to Gene Altizer and say that if he remembers a guy that had a black Pro gas-looking Charger way back when, I certainly remember the time that he spent with me, and a wonderful, wonderful person. But as an interesting point, since we're talking about gassers, a few years ago, we bought a 1950 Chevrolet, and it was built by a fellow by the name of Harry Logan. We purchased it from Harry and Carol Logan, and Harry happened to say, when I wound up building this car, there's a friend of mine who was into racing, and he raced an old gasser. And in fact, I was at his wedding, and he became my best man at my wedding. And his name is Harry Luzader. And so, interestingly, you guys probably remember a green 32 5-window Ford Coupe.
There's a picture of it downstairs.
So there's a little bit of a connection with that 1950 Chevrolet with Harry Luzader through Harry Logan. But basically what wound up happening with me over the years is back around 2019, right before I retired from Harley-Davidson, I wound up getting an interest in certainly over the years, I always had an interest in the older style cars, even though I was driving a more modern style car at the track. One of the cars that piqued my interest was this 1948 Austin Gasser. It was advertised in Racing Junk, and my brother, being my partner in crime, is the one that alerted me to it and said, "You ought to look at this." And so I did, and I wound up calling the owner, who was Mickey Hale. And Mickey Hale was looking to sell the Gasser at the time. Like I said, he had had it probably since around 2010, and he was racing in the Ohio Outlaw Gassers, and I'm guessing that you guys probably ran against Mickey Hale in the early days. But at any rate, working with Mickey, we sort of put together some of the history of the car, and I have some pictures of it here which will sort of show you what it went through. So basically, up in the upper left is how it started life. It was a car that was put together out on the West Coast, and a fellow by the name of Jeff Wright put it together. And he built it with a lone 392 with a torque flat transmission. And he raced it to a best time of about 840. Basically, he kept it for a number of years. It was called, of all things, Fat Boy's Folly. After some time, he wound up selling it. And he sold it to a guy by the name of Don Wilson. And Don was from British Columbia. And this is the way it looked when Jeff Wright built it. I can't say that I'm real happy with the paint job, but it was still cool for back in the day. But when Don Wilson bought it, he turned it into a bracket car. And this is a picture of what it looked like when he had it. He was running around 1070s. He had a small block Chevrolet in it with a single 4-barrel. And he was, like I said, from British Columbia and ran up around that neck of the woods. And then at some point in time, Mickey Hale bought the car. And when he first bought it, it looked pretty much like this. Right now you can see the car is sitting outside. It's got some striping along the side, and he has a graphic in the front, which he had put on it pretty much right before I bought the car. But basically, he was running in the Ohio Outlaw Gassers. His best time, he told me, was 820, running at about 156 miles an hour. Had some real good success with it. Here's a picture of him when he was running the 4-wide down at Z-Max in North Carolina. He also was up there at Beaver Springs at the Gasser reunion there, and at Thompson Dragway out in Ohio. He actually won a number of times at the events. Apparently, I guess he won Bowling Green twice with the Ohio Outlaw Gassers. There's a Night of Fire that's held out in Ohio right at the Summit Motorsports Park, and he won that apparently 2 times. He also raced at Indy at the U.S. Nationals. I guess there was some displays. You guys did some exhibition stuff out there.
Yeah.
And he told me he won that in 2013 and 2015.
I won it in 12.
You did?
I won it in 12, and I think he won it in 13.
And you guys might have some stories to share about racing against Mickey Hale.
Yeah, we did a lot.
Yeah, and I still keep in touch with him.
Where'd we see Mickey? Was that the Gators? Yeah, we just saw him at the Gators
Okay.
this year. Spent some time with him.
And he's a good guy.
Oh, great guy.
And I wound up buying it from him, and actually, what wound up happening is I bought the car, and I had not put a motor in it or done any changes to it after I first bought it, and he was building a Willys. He was going to compete in the Ohio Outlaw Gassers, and he basically said, well, I got this Willys that I'm working on, and we would keep in touch back and forth, and he said, well, I said, how's the Willys coming? Well, it's not done. He said, I got to get this thing done because I got a couple of dates that I have to make happen. And I finally got to a point, I said, listen, Mickey, I said, I still have the Austin. I haven't done anything with it yet. And if you want, I'll loan you the car back. You can put your motor and trans back in it and make the dates that you had committed to with that car. And we actually did that.
At no charge.
At no charge.
Hey, I'll take it for a year.
We'll talk.
I promise to
We'll
win.
talk, Fred. So basically, that is, what we wound up doing. Mickey had it for the better part of a year, raced it, and then he delivered it back to me, minus engine and trans. And at that point in time, I took the car over to John Little. John wound up updating a few things on the chassis. One thing that Mickey had never done with it was he basically said, I always wanted to put the gas pedal on the driver's side instead of having to swing his leg over the transmission tunnel. And also I wanted to go to a foot brake rather than having the hand brake. And we accomplished all that stuff, working with John Little to do that, and redid some of the interior of the car and actually moved the motor slightly forward. We have a small block in it, and the mounting tabs for the small block are the same as the original front mounting tabs for the big block. So that gave us a little extra room in the transmission tunnel area to be able to put the Power Glide in there, which is the same as what Mickey ran. It's a different transmission than the actual one that he ran. But he ran a Power Glide. We have a Power Glide in it. The rear is exactly as Mickey ran it. And we did lift the front end up a little bit and change the wheels. But other than that, it's a fun car to drive. Every time I get in it, I got a smile on my face. But I can tell you that the way I always term it to people who ask about, what's it like to drive one of these things? And I basically, I would tell them the tube frame car that I used to drive, basically I would put my mother in it and she would be able to drive at 10.0. I would not put my mother in the Austin. They are fun to drive, but they have a short wheelbase. It's a straight axle. It takes a little more attention. Yes, but it is fun. Every time I get in it, like I say, I got a smile on my face.
The car's out on the porch. We parked it yesterday. He asked me over it, so we brought it ahead in case of the weather, but he drove it. He started and drove it there. And, of course, he couldn't resist stomping on it a little bit. I knew that was going to happen. I told him maybe he could just stomp on it off the porch and we'd lay some rubber out there and, get his things around.
I think you'll do it.
It depends how much rubber you want to see on the porch.
Here we go. All right. Okay. Well, I just want to say Greg and his brother Gary and his sister are really staunch supporters of the museum and help me out a lot of times, and it's really neat. They have several cars, so when I get in a bind and we need a car for a display for a certain class, he's got one of them. So he does bring that car and get that car, and he was the poster child up at Bruce's Drag Fest back in October, so I certainly appreciate that.
I do want to thank very much all the interaction I've had with Bruce Larson and his crew, Bill and Dave back there. Bruce has been a tremendous influence in my life. It's just been an absolute pleasure for me to get to know him and the fellows who work with him. It's like a dream come true for me to get to know some of the folks that are up here. Again, I'm just a local bracket racer, but it is an honor, the honor of my life.
There again, there's Bruce Larson, and he's probably one of the biggest contributors to the drag racing area of the museum. Well, next we're going to move over to another supporter of the museum. That's Ken Bingham. He comes over and helps us fix the museum on Fridays and stuff. That's the old farts day when, the retirees come over on Friday. They're supposed to be fixing stuff, but we wind up bullshitting. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him tell about the car out on the patio also.
Okay, it's the Orange 37 Ford Coupe. It's the old Nash, Collodion, Yodoc car. I guess I should say it. It's Nash and Yodoc. They were the main guys behind it. They originally had what they called the Bun Bandit, which was I think a 27 or 28 Model A pickup that they campaigned very successfully. They started with that, and then they added the 37 to their collection in 1961 when they took it off the street and turned it into a pure drag car. I bought the car out of an ad in the auto locator probably in about, I'm guessing maybe 85, I guess. 83, 84, 85 is when I bought the car. And I actually bought it to flip. Didn't really know much about the car. I just thought it was a neat car, and I bought it. And it just happened to be the week before Fall Carlisle. From the very beginning, I had been a flea marketer at Carlisle events. So I told my wife, I said, we'll pick the car up the day before Carlisle, and we'll just take it down to the flea market and put it up for sale. When I took it in that day, from the minute I entered the grounds till I got it to my space, it was kind of like a big magnet. I mean, it drew a lot of attention. And like I said, this is in like 83-ish. And I was like, I couldn't figure it out because it was a used drag car. When we got it on the spot, my wife said, well, what are you going to ask for it? I said, well, I don't think I'm going to sell the car. And she said, why? I said, well, there's something going on here that I can't quite figure out. Why is it so many people interested in the car? So I said, simply just, we'll put a sign on it that says wanted, because I always wanted an early funny car or an AFX car. So I put a sign on it, wanted AFX or early funny car. Of course, through the process of the weekend being there, I did get some guys who were familiar with the car that knew a history about the car. At the time, it was painted black and it had Kid's Toy written on it for Kid Rarick, who is the gentleman who bought it from them originally. So few people knew about it, but in the process of this car sitting there, I think it was on probably the Thursday or Friday that weekend, a young kid walked into my display and said, I know where there's a funny car I think you'd be interested in. So I said, okay. So he describes the 66 Chevelle that's sitting downstairs, funny car. I honestly hadn't heard of the car, so I didn't, he was explaining this car to me. He's a fairly young fella. He was too young to have known the car from back in the day. And I eventually said to him, well, how do you know that this is actually a funny car? He goes, well, he said, it's a centerfold in 1966 Carcraft magazine. I was like, really? Okay. So in the process, he says, he said, it's just down the street from where I live. I'll get the guy's name and address and I'll let you know about it. Now, this is before cell phones. So anyhow, when I went home that night, I went to my attic and dug out my magazines, and there it is, June 1966 centerfold. And I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. How did I not get this guy's name and address? So it went probably, I'm thinking, maybe November of that year, I finally get a letter back from him that was very apologetic. He was sorry that he hadn't gotten back to me, but the guy had moved. And he tracked him down and found his new address and gave me the new address for me to go. Of course, I went out and bought the car and brought that car home and kept it. But in the process, the car that I bought to flip, I still have it. Never left it go. And of course, I learned more about the car. These guys were very, very active in the 60s in the local area. Raced it extensively in the mid-state area. I know they were at York, they were at Hagerstown. I'm not sure about South Mountain. Beaver Springs, they were there an awful lot. I have an interesting story for Beaver Springs. When we first got the car back together, we joined the East Coast Gassers. First race we went to attend was at Beaver Springs. I had never been to Beaver Springs because I quit drag racing in, I think, 71, and that's when Beaver Bob opened up. So anyhow, we get to the track that day with this car. We were a little bit late, as usual, and I'm in there, and this guy comes riding down the aisle with a scooter, and he's going, oh my God, that's the original car. I said, yeah, it's the original Nick Nash car. And he goes, they're lining up in the line. You got to get that car up there right away. And I said, well, I've got to get it checked in first. And he looks at me and said, well, where's your car? So I went in and got my tech card and I handed it to him. He scribbled something and he said, you're ready, get up in the line.
That's Beaver Bob.
He takes off. I turned around, some guy said, who was that fella? He goes, well, he owns the track, so if he says you're good to go, you're good to go. So we raced several times up there and then followed the circle around. I think it was a year or so later. Again, we're back at Beaver Springs. And my son was driving the car that day. Well, he blew the engine going through the lights, and that was the last time we ran the car. When we got back that night, I was like, this was a lot of fun when I was a kid. But this stuff of staying up late and building new engines, I said, no, I wasn't cut out for that. So we basically took the car and parked it in the back of the barn and left it sit for a few more years. And then one day my son said, we really ought to put that car back together. So he bought a motor, and that's the motor that's in it now. And I just haven't gotten around to finishing the final details so we can start it up and run it some more. But the real history belongs to Nick Nash and Jimmy Odock, because they were the instigators and the main operators back in the day. And as far as a nice original local East Coast car, I personally feel it's one of the better gassers because it's just a neat, and I kept it as original as I could. The motor I had in it back in the day was a correct motor with the right heads and all that nonsense. Son bought this motor. It's a newer motor. It's a 350 motor, but we just were like, okay, just for the sake of having something that runs. But it's just a nice, neat piece of original history. I'm glad I never flipped it. I'm glad I kept it. I'm not very successful at flipping, as you can see.
Thank God for that.
They stay.
Oh, thank you guys for your cards. I just wanted to say something in case you haven't noticed. These guys raced each other, but it actually was a big family because everybody knew everybody, and they all traveled together. Some of them slept together. And
That's a whole different story.
Okay, that's different. it was really united. It was really neat. You don't have that today. Everybody's out for each other, but they really mentored each other. They helped each other, and it was great. It was just true sportsmanship. So with that being said, I'm going to ask, we're going to turn this into a question and answer period. We're going to sort of angle off onto the S&S speech op. Of course, this was before my time. But I remember, and I think Fred was the one that said it, probably Beaver Springs. You know the 3 circle things that they have for the Olympics? Well, on his car, all the cars, there was 5 rings. You'll see it down on Gene Hofstadter's.
In the Olympics, it's 5 rings.
Is the Olympics 5 rings? Well, he said that stands for a 5-ring circus. And I thought that was probably appropriate. Because you guys were fun to watch.
A little history on that 5 rings. At the start of the 64 season, Chuck Stolze, who owned S&S Parts and at that time was sponsoring 5 gassers, of which I was fortunate to be one. And he came out with that design, and it became our emblem and our T-shirts and everything. A few years later, the U.S. Olympic Committee, who up until that time, if you're old enough to remember, the Olympic symbol was like a U.S. road sign, whatever shape. And they went to the 5 rings, and so what? Well, it turns out, years later, the S&S team is selected to be some of the top 50 gassers in the nation, and we were honored at the U.S. Nationals that year. And David Hales, one of our teammates, sent in pictures that NHRA requested to do promotion. And he gets a letter back that we can't use any of the pictures with the Olympic symbols on them. David calls me and he says, what do you remember about this? And I said, well, Stolze said that he copyrighted it and sued them, and they wound up settling. So we did some research, and it turns out, and he had copyrighted it, to change a copyright 15% is not an infringement. Well, the Copyright Committee decided, and I think Chuck agreed with them, that the 5 colors, and the Olympic Committee said they had picked 5 colors for the rings to represent the 5 continents, which made sense to me, and it was all settled. And we go, wow. David sent all of this back to NHRA. 3 days later, David got a letter or email from NHRA and says, we have checked your information. You are correct, right? We can use all of your pictures. And that's the end of that story. Now, footnote is, a few years ago, we're doing a reunion race at Old Dominion Speedway, which is where David and Gene and I grew up, made our first passes. And I think probably most rooms have somebody else that made their first passes at Old Dominion. We got Chuck's son to bring Chuck out there. He'd become very recluse. He enjoyed himself. We put him on the golf cart and took me back up the return road and all. And he came back the next year with his son brought him. And he gave me an envelope to Charles H. Stolze. And he says, here, I think you'd like to have this. I opened it up, and it was that year's Olympic flag, dated. And I go, oh, this is cool. What's this? And he says, every year they send me all kinds of stuff. And I thought maybe you'd like to have this, and I still have it. It's an honored possession. But the Olympic 5 rings, when you see them, change the colors to yellow and think of the S&S team.
Okay, well, while you're on the mic, tell us about the S&S organization. I should mention first, Dave Hales, who lives in Florida, and I thought he lived close to Fred, but they're on the other side of the continent, I guess, down there. Dave Hales was very instrumental in getting Gene's car here because he's more or less what do I want to say? He takes care of the legal work, and Fred does the gopher work. But he called me and was very receptive to us having the car and wanted to check it all out. His car is in Speedway.
Yes. David's Willys is the only S&S car that survived. All the rest of them got
He was a better driver.
crashed, killed, shot, buried, whatever happened to all of them. And that includes a person that wasn't one of our original 5, but right at that time became an S&S member, and that was Malcolm Durham. I know Bruce raced against Malcolm, and I know some others knew him. Malcolm was one of the finest gentlemen I've ever known in my life. He was a good racer. He was a good friend. He was outgoing. He would help you if you had a problem. Am I right, Bruce?
And we have him in the showcase.
He was
down
an
there.
SNET team member.
Over towards
for a
the
period
entrance,
of
we have the
time.
strip blazer.
But,
We have a picture of his 63 409, I think 63 409, then his later cars. We had a little tribute to him 10 years ago, and his wife and son were here. Swell guy, I only ever met him one time, but Baltimore, Maryland. He was basically close, and he raced at Cecil quite often. He came to York often, too, when he wasn't.
Now you started to ask me something.
The question I want to ask you is, what were the first original members of the SNS team? Which cars?
Good question. Close to you all's hearts, the Hall's hearts, was K.S. Pittman. Chuck Stolze owned it. The SNS 33 Willys, all steel bodied with a Zuschel Hemi. Gene Altizer in the A-Gas Anglia that's living downstairs, and we are very proud to have put it on loan here for the world to see. Much better than being covered in a garage somewhere.
Freddie's garage.
We're honored that it's here, and I hope everybody enjoys the car. I was the B-gasser in my Willys. Charlie Hill and Port Zartman were the C-gas with the Filthy 40, which was the only car out of SNS, the original 5, that was not SNS red. And then Dave Hales was the D-gas Willys. And Charlie refused to paint his car, and he refused to let him wash it. And Bruce probably remembers this. They came out with 90-10 uplot shocks. Tremendous invention. Stolze was warehouse distributor, or SNS, for almost all the manufacturers because he got in on the ground floor of it. We each got a pair of them, and they were chrome plated. Well, that was the only chrome on David's and mine, Gene's car. Of course, KS's car, which Stolze owned, had chrome axle and chrome rear, and Jim Clinton's old car. But it was beautiful. Gave him to Charlie. Charlie took him home and spray painted him black and put him on his car. So, it's just a little insight in how we became the first successful racing team. Others were owned by the same company or the same person, but they were competitors. We were the SNS racing team, but we were competitors to our competitors. Gene would not adjust the valves and change the plugs on his car to help put a clutch in my car to make next round. And then I might beat him for Little Eliminator. And it worked every way. But years later in NASCAR, a very successful team came out of Alabama known as the Alabama Gang, which I was fortunate enough during that time to work with and for those people. The Allisons knew through me of the success that we had had. And when the Alabama Gang showed up at your track, you knew you had to have your act together because it wasn't one car you had to beat. You had to beat them all. And we traveled together, the SNS team. When we got there, you had to go through all of us. And we all had fun doing it. We loved traveling together. I got a bunch of stories in the early 60s of traveling through the South in Malcolm, Durham that I guess I could tell some of y'all here. But some of them are signs of the progress that our country has made. And I was proud to be a part of it.
You were talking about the shocks, and and he'd give me a pair of shocks. At the time that KS had the Austin, he had to go match race somewhere, and he was staying in Jersey around our area with my dad. And I think my dad had the 33. He just bought the 33, and KS had the Austin.
Yeah.
He says to my dad, "Hey Harry, I got a match race Virginia this weekend. I want to give you the Austin, and I'm gonna take the 33 because it was a better handling car. That Austin, my dad said that thing. They used to call it the football, and he said that thing would switch lanes.
It acted like a football.
Yeah, it would just never went straight. So that's all right. Well, I'm gonna take the Austin, and we're gonna race it test it at Maple Grove or something. My dad took the car home, they unloaded it, and the shocks. He said, "There's something with these shocks I can't figure out. They don't work for crap." They took the shocks apart, and the oil in them was like WD-40. It was so thin. So my dad said, "Well, we got laying around here. It's thick." So he said to a buddy, his Kenny Coons, used to help him with the car. Kenny said, "I got some of this rear grease over here. Let's dump some in it." They dumped in it. They went out to Maple Grove. And at the time, in double A gas, the record was at 848 at the time. So my dad says, they go out and run it, and it went at 852. So they came back, and my dad said, don't say a word to KS. So next weekend, Dad had a match race KS at like Cecil County or something. So KS comes back from his race with the 33. Sorry, Harry, give my car back. Dad says, nah, I'll run this. I'm used to driving it right now. You run with the 33 and we'll run it at Cecil County. So they got the first pass and Dad said, I went at 8:54. KS went at 8:68 or something. I cleaned his clock. And the track, KS walks over and he says, Harry, what'd you do to my car? He says, I ain't telling you, Tiger. He says, and I'm running it the rest of the year. He says, you can keep that 33. He says, no, Harry, I want my car back. But that was a great thing. Then KS had the Opel GT at the time, and Dad had the 33. And they used to match race a lot. Maple Grove. They tore around the East Coast up and down. And I have articles of match racing these cars. Dad says that he had just made a run by himself, a single, and KS came down with somebody. And on the Opel, and if you ever see an Opel GT, the little cadet, your feet are really, even KS was a short guy, you're really crammed in this car. Well, KS's foot, like you talked about, moving the foot pedal, was up on the trans tunnel. And he said, now KS, if you didn't know KS, he always smoked cigars. Always had a cigar in his mouth. He even drilled a hole in his fire mask and had a cigar sticking out of his fire mask. Yeah. So Dad says, we're down the track. I see the car coasting. Smoke's come out of it. I'm wondering what happened to him. He comes to a stop, and his foot is out of the windshield. It had blown the transmission up and blew his foot out of the windshield. So my dad was walking over his door, and he did. He says, Tiger, you okay? And he says he's dripping with transmission fluid all over him. And he says his cigar is out. And he says, I don't know if I'm more upset about my foot hanging out of the window or my cigar's bad. He says, Harry, would you push my foot out of the windshield so I get out of this dang thing? I heard more great stories, and it's a shame. I was born in 70, so I missed that era. And I used to say to my dad how upset I was I missed being a part of that era of back then when they ran these cars, because the stories I heard, the crazy crap they did. They were staying at an Indy, and my dad was in one of the hotels, and he was talking to, I forget the guy's name, who was one of the master tuners back then, someone who was an engine builder, but they were at a hotel of a mile down the road. So my dad was in the parking lot, and KS and Masmanian and Junior Thompson, all these guys were standing talking, and they were tuning someone's car. So my dad said, I just can't get this barrel valve to go right, I have a problem with it. So the guy said to my dad, where's your car at? Dad's up at the hotel here. Well, why don't you bring it down? We'll look at it. So Dad went up, unloaded it off the trailer, and drove it down the highway to the hotel. The guy says, what are you doing? He says, you told me to bring it down. The guy says, yeah, on the trailer. But that was back in the day where you could get away with that a little bit more. You weren't getting in trouble for it. I have pictures at home that I cherish this day of like my dad. There's a picture of him at Island Dragway, the first time ever he would first met KS, being towed down the track in KS's all-steel high-roof 33 when he first met him.
Yeah, the steel car.
The steel car. And that's when he crashed, I think, in Texas or something like that.
Mineral
Wells,
yeah.
Where he was born, yeah.
Where he was born.
More great stories of those cars, of what they did and what you guys went through. I mean, like I said, Dad told me that KS car was an original 33 frame rails that they would just beef up a little bit and do stuff to them to make them legal. And I look inside the cars then, the pictures of them, and I think, how did you guys live? You guys were insane back then.
Good young, we get to live forever.
Well, that's it, But like my dad used to say, that's all we knew. That's what you race in. I see the helmets like down on display here in these rooms. The helmets that you guys wore and the fire suits that you wore, I look at today with what we have in technology, and I think you guys were out of your mind. They got the job done.
One of Gene Altizer's early helmets is downstairs in the display case. Bill Klein brought it up. I mean, I knew Gene had it a long time. Before Gene's mother talked him into not racing motorcycles anymore because it was dangerous, so he went drag racing. But he had that helmet from there, and he wore that helmet into his funny car career. Bill says there's no manufacturer, there's no tags, there's no date. It's almost as old as dirt, but it was all we knew, and it was all we had. Thank you, Lord, for taking care of us.
Still here to tell the story, right? Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, look at some of these helmets and the things, and look at the roll bars. A lot of these sprint cars, every picture you see, the helmet is this far above the roll bar. Now, where is the safety in that one, folks?
Who passed that protect, right?
Everybody did it. All of them were the same.
And that's why I say, I have my father's fire suit downstairs on display. That was probably from around 74 or 5, I'm guessing, the blue fire suit, Mom. And I look at that today, the fire suits that we have now, like Bruce that you wore and stuff, and I think it's amazing, the helmet that's down there. I mean, I'm afraid to drop it from my waist high. It's going to crack in half. And I think, you guys felt safe in these things. But it's funny we say that. I drove for almost 20 years a jet car for the Hannas, for Al Hanna.
Did a hell of a job.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much, bud. I really did. I closed my eyes because speed scares the hell out of me.
Wait a minute, folks. Not only did he do a hell of a job of driving stupid
My dad said that, yeah. My dad, when I first drove it, he said, "Why do you want to drive that weed burner? What are you thinking?"
But he made probably thousands and thousands of friends for himself and drag racing. This gentleman was so good with the crowd, with the public, that even if he'd been bad, Al Hanna would have kept him on.
I paid him to hang around. That's all it was, yeah.
Well,
thank you.
Al was good people.
Yes, he was.
Al was good people.
And we just lost Al Hanna a few months ago. He was my boss for years with the jet cars. We could get on to the story like that. We're not here for that, but he will be missed. He was a good guy. He's the one that hired me and took me to another level. My mother and my father took me to a level of racing, and I was fortunate them to build cars with us and let me and my twin brother drive the Willies and the T-Buck and everything else. So thank you, Mom, for that. We're very fortunate to have family who did it.
Way back when, and I don't know who made the rule, whether it was the NHRA or Old Dominion or Quasco or what, but the new rules for that year were that you had to take your jacket and soak it in borax
To make it fireproof.
and hang it up to dry. To fireproof your jacket. Well, thank God none of them ever caught on fire that I know of, because I can't imagine it helping. But
Smelled nice.
and they were stiffer than
They would stand up by themselves.
That's what I'm saying.
They're like canvas.
It's funny you say about Old Dominion, Manassas Dragway. I drove Rocky's one gasser down there at Manassas Dragway.
Reunion.
Yeah, at the reunion.
We
We ran each other. I think when I staged, I remember going up looking over for Freddie, and I could have reached over and touched his door handle. I thought, please go straight.
Oh.
For you and me both.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we left the line. We went 300 feet, and it was smoking the tires. I only had a half throttle, and it was, from guardrail to center line. And then I'm going, if I'm doing this, what's Fred doing? So I kept looking for Fred. Is he in his lane? Where are we at now? And we had better tires and better at that point.
When I first raced there, it was no wider, but there were no guardrails. And this is in the late 50s. You'd be getting ready for the flagman, and the crowd would be down about 300 or 400 feet, and you took off, and as you got there, they backed up and stood on the edge of the track. And I don't think we ever ran over anybody.
You don't think so, right?
I don't.
Yeah, I never heard stories,
well,
but
it didn't happen when I was there, thank goodness. But it was the way it was. It was accepted, and we were being as safe as we could. I mean, we had a paper-thin helmet and a borax jacket and a seatbelt. Cost $1.98 at Pep Boys. That was probably down with sheet metal screws. And thank you, Wally Parks and Bill French, for making safety rules, and everybody that contributed, because we sure are still having fun, huh, Bruce?
yeah.
And Bruce
Can share stories too of all that.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah.
What kind of fire suit did you have when you drove that car? Do you remember?
T-shirt.
No fire suit.
No fire suit.
No.
Well, you had a helmet though, right?
Jeans and
No gloves.
Jeans and a t-shirt.
T-shirt. No
Yeah.
gloves.
Well, I remember pictures somewhere who it was driving a funny car, and they had gardening gloves on. I thought, who in their right mind passed that? But I guess maybe they were soaked in borax or whatever. They were safe. Yeah, they were like brand new. Yeah.
He never got his hand around the steering wheel.
Never once. Guys, I apologize because Fred and I could sit here for hours just keep telling stories, and I'm just remembering stories that you guys were saying about the shocks and stuff, and it was.
We're the entertainment department. You all are serious.
Yeah, really. I sit and tell the funny stories. These guys are telling the historical facts, and I'm like, well, I feel like an idiot sitting here telling these goofy stories. But as my mom would say, I'm sure we all said, we were lucky enough to have my dad and KS and Freddie and all these guys that contributed to what my dad got to do, and we were fortunate to do it. The cars that were still around today, unfortunately, a lot of those cars aren't here anymore. The KS, the 33 Act crashed. Like you said, a lot of the original SNS guys, their cars are all crashed, or
Charlie's, the filthy 40 crashed.
Yeah.
My car got crashed. A guy who became real good drag racer in New York, Bob Chipper.
Oh yeah.
Bob Chipper bought my car and raced it with a blown small block in it with a 4-speed, set the mile-an-hour record for Big Ass Super in that car with a blown small block with a 4-speed. He was in a build-up area, and a Mopar Super Stocker went to do a burnout and was in reverse and slammed into the driver's door. Today, we'd fixed it. He scrapped it and put everything in a 33 Willys, and then he went to funny cars.
We ran with him,
Yeah, I thought you probably ran him
Yeah,
with
we
funny
ran him for
cars.
years, yeah.
But that was the end of mine. Altizer's first Anglia, the stock top one that won the Nationals, it was just on an Anglia chassis. And after 1 year, it was war slam out. So we cut the car up because he built his car, single car garage under his parents' house. So we started a new car, and I started bracing and
More roll cage and
no more roll bar, but strengthening the frame, gussets and plating and stuff that we all learned as time went on. And then that car sold and disappeared. So we don't know what happened to that. David's car made the rounds, and he bought it back a few years ago, restored it. In fact, the person that painted it, 29 years later, painted it again. He was a friend of ours. He painted all my stock cars. He painted my, and I said, this paint job is under warranty, isn't it? So that's the one in the museum. Malcolm's Corvair became Altizer's Corvair. He bought it from Malcolm before he went to the Logie cars. Now you crash a car and you fix it. Back then, you just got another one.
they were still prevalent. Yeah, you can still get them. Well, I'm going to pass it down to you guys, but I just wanted to, one thing. Jeff, thank you so much, and the museum for letting us put my dad's door in the museum, and Doug Wood. This all would have been possible without you.
My honor.
Believe me. That door had been long gone for years, and if you were at the Lebanon car show last year, Doug presented the door. There's a picture over here of him presenting the door to our family on stage, and that door had been missing for years and years and years. Doug bought it at an auction and learned the story of how we were looking for it, which we didn't know Doug until this time, and he so graciously donated it to our family. I had talked to Jeff and said...
Wait a minute. He said he was giving it to me, but you outbid me. Now you say he gave it to you. What's the deal here? I don't want to hear it.
And Doug, we still owe you dinner. We keep trying to get this planned. And anyway, the door finally came back to us last year, I believe it was, at the Lebanon Drag Fest. So I talked to Jeff, and I said, instead of it sitting in our home, and doing nothing, it would be an honor to have my dad and KS remembered and put here on display with my dad's fire suit and a couple other items. Jeff and the whole staff here, thank you so much. It means the world to my family.
We're really proud to have it. And I also want to say something. Doug also donated KS's toolbox. What would you call it? It's a big box that he kept his suit and stuff in, traveled with him. Yeah, it's downstairs with full pictures. It's a box, a wooden box. Unfortunately, I don't have enough room to put it on the floor. I'm figuring maybe we can hang it from the ceiling or something. That was Lynn's thing. Well, we'll hang it from the ceiling. Well, thank God the snow load's high. I just wanted to know it's there. When we get done with our inventory, I'll get it out to be seen. But
Do you want the Cliff Notes version of how I came into all this stuff?
yeah,
So a friend of mine is in the business of helping people sell cars on the internet and stuff like that. Howard Radke apparently was a friend of K.S. Pittman's also. And when K.S. would come into town, if he wasn't staying with the Halls, he would stay with Howard. When Howard passed away several years ago, my buddy J.D. was contacted to help liquidate Howard's car collection. He took care of the cars, but he said, hey, Doug, look, I've got all this K.S. Pittman stuff. Do you want any of it? Of course, I had no idea the whole story that was going on. So I said, yeah, I'll take anything of KS's that you've got. So I paid whatever the estate wanted for the goodies. I was just going to hang on to it. But then I got to thinking that, I don't know that it's sitting in my basement's doing anybody any good. So I was going to give it to Rocky to go out to Lions with the tribute car. And the year before I gave the door to you guys, Rocky told me the story that the Hall family had been trying to get a hold of that door from Howard for years and years. I don't know the backstory, but there was some bad blood, I think, that was going on. He said, no, there's no way you're getting it from me, but I'll buy that grill shell from you, something like that. When I heard the story, Rocky took me over to meet Ken and Mike. Mom wasn't there that day, and I just knew that that's where the door needed to live. So I decided at that time that I was going to gift it to them, and I had a friend of mine make the cherry stand that it's sitting on, and I gifted it to him at Dragfest. Honestly, it has been my honor, really has.
Well, we looked for that door for a long time. I knew where it was, and my dad had actually years ago, probably in the early 80s, mid 80s, had given the door to a guy that worked at Vargo, was Dick Long. Dick did tech there and things like that. It was just everybody knew Dick at Vargo. So he gave him to hang in his barn. He had a big display in his barn of all kinds of memorabilia. It was a really cool thing, like Bruce Larson's. It was a beautiful display, and it was just a lot of memorabilia. Well, when Dick had passed, his son sold the door to Howard. And we didn't know anything about it. We didn't know what had happened. I just heard that Dick had passed, and I thought, okay, well, let me reach out and talk to. I tried to call his wife. No one answered the phone, and I was trying to get the door back. I said, if things are going to start getting just gone, or I want the door back, because it was never theirs to sell. So when it got sold to Howard, I found out Howard had it, and I'd met Howard through KS and my dad. I had said, Howard, I understand that you have the door. I'd like to get it back. It was my dad's, and he said, well, I bought it. It's mine. And I said, well, it wasn't for sale. I want it back. My dad gave it to Dick just to display in his barn, and it was never meant to be sold. It was loaned to him. So it became a sort of a heated argument on the phone, and I just said, I hung up, and I called him back. I said, listen, I don't want to fight with you. I just want to say, in writing, let's do something of some kind of contract that I get the door back before it gets sold again to someone who we have no idea where it is. So he pretty much didn't agree with that and hung the phone up on me, and it was never to be seen again. And this is where you came in, you purchased the door years later. At that point, I give up on it. I thought it was just gone. It was who knows where. So when you approached me and my brother at the car show with it and told us you had the door, it was like the Easter Bunny had just delivered Santa Claus to me. So that's where the whole story came from. So that's where you have been such an instrumental part of getting this back, you and your family. So our family thanks you so much, Doug. Thank you.
And Howard, thank you.
Harry thanks you.
And Howard, in this story, some of you may know, among his car collection was a clone of KS's 56 Ford pickup that he had in numerous shows all over this area, the York shows, Lebanon Valley. He built that truck in honor of his friend KS, and that may tie it together for some of y'all.
Yeah, that's cool. That is cool.
I just want to mention, I contacted Rocky Perone when we decided to get this all together a few months ago. Told him what we were doing. I could almost hear him bawling on the phone. He said, I got to go to Texas. We're having a match race with the funny cars. I can't come.
And he didn't go.
Yeah, canceled, yeah.
But his cars were here on display 3 years ago, I guess, for a couple of years, 2-3 years ago. So his dad's car was here, and the new car that they reincarnated was here. So we'll get him back. So now I want to know why you guys built your race cars out of the orphaned foreign car backlot special cars. Were you just cheap? You don't want to spend the money for a good car like Ken's cars? At least it's a Ford. All the offbeat stuff is what you built these cars out of. What was that all about? The Willys was cheap. Austin, that was a foreign car, wasn't it?
What are you talking about?
Why were you?
Wait a minute.
All right, here you go. Here we go. This is gonna be a true
David
story.
paid $20 for his Willys,
And still has it.
and he still has it. Well, he paid more for it the second time, by the way.
And he worked for Ford Motor Company.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Son
not
of
at
a gun.
that time. We looked for a long time after David's car got wrecked in a towing accident coming back from Aquasco for Willys. A lot of funny stories with those trips, but we finally found David's Willys in a guy's yard who was a hoarder. Didn't know it at the time there was a word like that, but there is now. They had school buses packed up to the windows and the doors with stuff, refrigerators, everything. And he had this Willys. I don't want to sell it. Well, we wound up making a deal because we didn't want the engine, the transmission, the rear end, the tires and wheels, the seats. And so he got it for $20, but we had to give him a $20 deposit. And then we brought all of those parts back, put them in a pile, got the $20 deposit back. Now, a year later, Altizer wants to build an Anglia. Hey, the guy in TB near Brandywine, Maryland, had an Anglia, So we go over there. Altizer bought the Anglia for a total of $15. But he had to give a $20 deposit until he brought the engine to trade. Oh, and when we went over to get the Anglia, all of David's stuff was still in the same pile. And when we took all the Anglia parts back, got the $20 deposit back. My Willys is the one that I have now. I bought in '67 before we found David's in Thurmont, Maryland, which we just came through. We found this, and the gentleman had this Willys and a Willys pickup truck. Well, this Willys was his parts. His pickup truck was his farm truck. Well, the Willys had been sitting there, and there was a sapling about that big, had grown up between the front bumper and the front end. And we made a deal for it, and I don't remember how much. $25 seems in my memory. And there are no tires and wheels on it. So we go back the next weekend, and the old man, farmer, is not there, but his son is. So we tell the son, we're going to give you a $100 deposit. We're going to jack up the pickup truck, take the tires and wheels off of it, put it on the Willys, and while we're making this, I saw the sapling down. And the boy said, oh, yeah, okay. Well, the sapling had to be cut down. Took the bumper off. You still couldn't get the car out. It was in the woods. We got the tires and wheels on the car, hooking up a tow bar, and he comes home and goes ballistic, yelling at his kid, yelling at David and I about cutting his tree down. Hell, man, you got hundreds of them. David gets mad at it. Well, David didn't ever get mad at anybody, but he's got his money back. And we left. That was 62, 63. David built the car. Now I'm going to college in D.C. at night, trying to get smarter. It didn't work. One of my classmates says, a friend of mine's got a Willys that he's going to build, and he's lost interest, and he's paying rent on his garage. You want to buy it? I said, oh, yeah. She said, when can I look at it? How about Saturday? Okay. So I go over, walk in this garage. I'm looking at the car. I look inside, and here's this giant slash where somebody has taken an axe to the sail area. And I go, this car came from Thurmont, Maryland. And this guy goes, yeah, how did you know? I said, David Hales and I, oh, yeah, he doesn't like you guys. Well, I still own that little girl. Or we now own it. I have a partner. We own it and we love it. She's raced it. I've raced it a whole lot. The original frame from under that car is under the K.S. Pittman Rocky Perone car.
Tell us about that.
That's my 33 Willys frame. Frame underneath of our Willys is under the big John Masmanian car.
Wow. Talk about incest.
Man, yeah.
And what was the other frame? You were telling me the story the other day. Whose other frames where?
The 33 frame came with one of the Anglias, Rex Redthroat. Some of y'all know him from Florida, four-door prefect, crazy man. Very involved with our NASCAR hot rod reunions. A friend of his had an Anglia. We are looking to build a new Altizer car. I go down, I look at it and I go, and they wanted a lot at the time. I don't know. Rex says, what about the frame for it? And I said, frame? Because it was just a body in the garage. So go out behind a shed, and here is an Anglia frame, and it turns out Rex had boxed it. Rex, professional welder, he had boxed it. Well, to look at it, when we dig it up out of the weeds, there's another frame, really in the dirt. But I look at it, I grab it, stand it up, and I go, this is a Willys frame. And he goes, yeah, I built that years ago, and I never have done anything with it. And I go, well, does all this go with the body? He said, yeah, I could do that. I'm driving out of his driveway. I didn't even get to the main highway because we were building the KS car. But going by the 67 rules, it had to be on a manufactured frame. It couldn't be on a 68. You could put them on a tube chassis. But we built that in 67. KS did. So that's what Rocky wanted. I wasn't 100 yards out of their yard loading the car up. I call Rocky and I go, I got a 33 frame! So
you probably thought you were hallucinating at that point, right?
The whole family stays together, and that's what all forms of racing are, and all of you that are racers know exactly what I'm talking about. You got a family that you're blood to, but it's nowhere near as good or big as the family you got racing. And that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's very true.
I'll just say that earlier I talked about my partner in crime being my twin brother. And so I just wanted to let you all know he just walked in the door. So the guy in the back there. Over the years, best friends growing up, and basically had a lot of the same interests, and we both went down the same path doing the car stuff and collecting and racing, and he's here in attendance.
You guys call yourselves the Surf Brothers.
The Surf Brothers.
First thing is, he's told 5 or 6 stories about you. I want to know which one of them are true.
They're all lies. Yeah, Gary and I, like I said, our father was the one who's responsible for us both getting into this, probably way more than he ever had thought we would. Just over the years, we've had the pleasure to be a part of all of this and to make some great friends. And really, despite the fact that we all have a tendency to focus on the hardware, I have to say that it's really the friendships that we make that make this whole car scene as important to us as it really is. The hardware is the means to an end, but it's the friendships that make the most difference.
I just want to say something in the intermittent. Greg said about his dad getting him a magazine. In 1963, when I was 10, we went out to Western Canada where my father was born. Now, that was about a 3-week trip. We drove around there and came back. So, of course, at 10 years old, back in those days, they didn't have phones and computers and stuff, so I got bored. Well, we stopped in the grocery store, and my dad bought me a Hot Rod magazine. It was the August issue of 1963, and I read that thing 30 times over that. I still have it. It's torn, it's frayed and everything, and that hooked me.
Yeah, actually, my brother and I don't know what he said here. I hope it's not all bad. You're probably going to tell the same story that I'm not going to. Anyway, yeah, my brother and I had gotten into it years and years ago as kids. We just loved getting Super Stock magazine and seeing all the cars that were in there and what have you. Years passed. I got married, and I had done just a little bit of drag racing, just a couple of shots down the track. And I was talking to my wife, and she said, well, you've been talking about going racing. Why don't you just go do it? She probably regrets that to this day, because we started out, I bought a 1955 Chevy, which I still have. And in fact, I've run it up at South Mountain Dragway. It's been at some of the car shows. I don't know if we had it in the museum or not. But it's bright orange and started with one engine. Actually, I bought it, and I remember when we looked at it down in Maryland, and I was with a friend of mine who's passed away, and I turned to him and I said, do you think this thing is safe? He said, well, I think it's safe enough. Anyway, we ran it for a while, took it up to Beaver Springs and ran it out of 406 in it at that point. 406 small block and 2-speed glide, set of 513 gears in back. We thought they were 488s, but then we counted teeth, and I think it was 513s. Anyway, ran it at Beaver, ran it at South Mountain. It was running down around 10.0, and we said, well, I think I should get this thing certified. There was a certification up at South Mountain one day, and so I ran up there with the car. Kurt LeSure was inspecting, and he looked at the car, and he said, well, this isn't going to pass, this isn't going to pass, this isn't going to pass, and this isn't going to pass. So I turned to him and said, so you're telling me if I stay above 10.0, I can be safe? This is fine. And he looked up very slowly and purposefully and said, well, have you got a wife? You got kids? Nice. And at that point, I parked the car, and luckily I had another car to run. After we got married, I bought a 63 Corvette tube frame car, ran that for about a year, and fixed the 55 Chevy. So we completely redid the frame on it, redid all the aluminum work, and then ran the car after that, and it did certify at that point. And that's the way the car is today, with the exception that I changed the motor. We put a 421 small block in it, and I think it's run a best up at South Mountain 625 or something like that up there. So it's a fun car, reminiscent to the Gassers, although I would call it more, it's a bracket car at this point. It started life as a Gasser. The history on it was that we went back far enough to find out it had been pulled out of a junkyard, similar to what happened with your cars, Fred. Had a tree growing out of the center of it, and a friend of mine had pulled it out, restored it as a race car, and it went through several iterations, and then finally it is where it is today. In fact, we just had it at the Lebanon show this past January. Had a real nice time up there. It's a great show. So I'm honored to be here. It's far from what I expected when I walked in the door, but but nevertheless, I have to echo what has been said before, which is really racing is a community. Everybody looks out for each other, and it's a testament to a group of people that really have the same interests and care for each other.
Now, I guess at this point, I got one more question.
I got two answers, and you're not going to like one of them.
How did they designate? Now, when you ran out of S&S, you all ran different classes.
Yes.
What was the difference between A and B? Was it cubic inches or horsepower? How did they classify it?
At that time, the rules were cubic inches to weight. B was 11 pounds to the cubic inch. C was 13. D was, I think, 15. A was maybe 7. So if you had a 301 Chevy, your car, and run B gas, it had to weigh 2,709 pounds. Makes sense? And they had a P&G to check cubic inches, or before they invented PG, you had to pull ahead if you got protested or you could set the record.
Or cheating. Or cheating.
What?
Cheating.
Never heard that word.
What did he say?
Cheating. They heard you. They know what you're talking about. NHRA. This was told to me,
sir. This is America. We like to speak English.
NHRA had the rule book, and I think they started in 1958. I'll never forget George Nye, who was the announcer at York, said, "Yeah, NHRA tells you what you can't do, but they don't tell you what you can do." So everybody cheated, and the guy that cheated the best won.
It wasn't cheating until you got caught.
There you go.
Innovation.
That's the second part of the slogan. It wasn't cheating until you got caught. Okay, that was before they went horsepower.
Cubic inches to weight. It was that way until they went to bracket racing, which made it so much easier for everybody but the racers. Because then,
double-edged sword.
Then you run 10 seconds flat, and if you run quicker than that,
you're out.
You're out of here, and that's why I quit drag racing.
And if the guy beats you, you're out.
Because
you're racing yourself.
When they made the rule, people started getting ahead of the other car, hitting the brakes,
sandbagging
to go across the finish line. Well, in reality, that creates negative caster,
runs the car out of control,
multiplies the incorrect steering, and a lot of cars crash. And I said, I really like racing to the finish line, and that's when I went stock car.
Fastest car, it's very hard for people to understand bracket racing.
Now they have perfected it with delay boxes and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what all that is.
It used to be the fastest car won, and then when the fastest car don't win, the audience, the spectators don't get it.
We had more fun, didn't we?
I had heard stories, and then I actually saw a picture someplace when they raced at York, and I think this was at the big first Superstock Nationals. Of course, York was a long track with a big shutdown area. People were lined the whole way up. They would come out on the track, the cars would leave the line, and you'd watch them come, and they'd spread off the track. Yeah. And then they go past, back on the track, next pair come down through, and that's how it was. Talk about safety. Now, wasn't that safe, huh?
That was at York.
Yeah.
When they ran 4 wide.
Yeah,
I remember people all over. But I'd already experienced that.
There's a picture of it downstairs, a 4-car wide deal. But I just want you to all know, I worked there, but this was before I did that. The only 2 cars that actually worked off the staging, it was the center 2 cars, the normal 2 cars. When they took off, the 2 outer cars took off. So it really wasn't 4. It was 4 wide, but it was only 2 lanes working the clock. So
they ran 4 wide.
Yeah, but they all looked off the Christmas tree, and only the 2 and the 2 in the middle were the ones that were.
It was on one.
They were the ones that got. They were the ones that got the time slip. The 2 outer cars, there was no time slip. Let's throw it open to you guys out in the audience. Anybody want to ask these guys questions?
Yeah, will the twins loan me some money?
I don't have any left.
Good answer.
It's in my car.
Good answer.
Cars.
How about loaning me a car to race for a year?
That'd be a good work that out.
You break it, you fix it. Isn't that the guarantee? You break it, you fix it.
That's it, and don't ever lose.
That happened to me one time. My buddy Bryce Camaro over. He's out of my car, ain't running right. I took it out and beat it and blew it up, so I wound up fixing it. But I did find out what was wrong with it, but it cost a little time and money. Yeah, that's the way it goes.
Curious, Fred. Did you ever get interviewed by the Wide World of Sports fella? What's that blanking on?
No.
Chris Economaki. Did you?
No, but they interviewed Porky, and it was quite entertaining. He had a big black wide brim Amish hat on, and of course a cigarette. Part of it is on a movie.
What year would it
But I would have
Amy's Outlaws.
no. The first national televised drag race was the 1963 Nationals. It was on Wild World of Sports, and it was delayed for them to edit, and it was on, I think, in October. And it turns out ABC Wide World of Sports showed up, and they knew nothing about drag racing. Here was this guy with media or something who turned out to be Monk Reynolds, who some of you people know. He went on to do Superstock magazines and Drag Illustrated.
He was also the promoter of the topless thing at York US 30, which never happened because it rained out that weekend.
He was quite a promoter. He was a mailman in Alexandria. His name was Monk Reynolds. At one of the Ramrod show, he raffled off his street rod pickup. Street rod wasn't a term then, but that's what it was. Luckily, his brother-in-law won it. That was the bankroll for Monk, and he started Eastern Drag News, which morphed into magazines, Stock Car and Superstock Drag Illustrated, and various other things. But he was there with Eastern Drag News, Wide World of Sports guys. What are we doing? And an East Coast car would come to the start line. Oh, this will be a good run. And then a California car would come to the start line. No, you don't want this. So if you ever watch that, and it's available, everything's available on the internet. But if you ever watch it, the vast majority of it, every run is an East Coast car. And Pork got interviewed, and quite a few others.
Pork lived right here in Hanover, just 10 miles from here.
256 Baltimore Street.
There you go.
I slept on the couch many nights.
I bet that was a party. But yeah, how about that? Isn't it amazing how everything's all related? You know, it's really neat, you know.
And Pork grew up and became an IRS agent.
No kidding. I never knew that.
That's after drag racing and Hill and Zartman fiberglass and a guitar shop. He finished college, mid to late 20s. He interviewed for an FBI job and was accepted, and he asked for duty station. No, we assign you duty stations. Well, now he told me a few years ago the FBI finally dropped that program. But then he went and interviewed with IRS, and they wanted to hire him, and he asked for a duty station, and they said, where do you want to go? And he said, York, Pennsylvania. And they said, no problem. And he was an IRS agent out of the York, Pennsylvania office, and lived at 256 Baltimore Street in Hanover from the time he got married until he died.
I never knew that.
I'll stick around. I got 1,000 of them.
And he didn't fit the mold. You never thought that's what he'd have been.
He knew all the things, the ins and outs. All
Oh, he did.
Did he? Okay.
Oh, he did.
All right. See, that was before my time.
To the extent that he did tax returns for his friends, and one of his friends is a Harley dealer. Well, he's on 30.
It was Lagerman's, Bud Lagerman's.
Well, every time Pork wanted to go to Sturgis, guess who loaned him a motorcycle?
So there is benefits, right?
Oh, there's benefit.
How about that? What a small world. Wow.
How many of you knew Pork?
Yeah,
Did he look,
I always
in
thought-
later life, did he look like Wilford Brumsley,
Yes.
the TV
Yes.
actor?
The mustache.
Okay. He and David and I are in an airport somewhere on a connection. I think we're going to a hot rod reunion in California. We're sitting there. Pork's reading his USA Today. Every day he read that paper. And we're sitting there, and these two women, David and I are looking at each other, and Pork's reading. finally they stop and they go, "Excuse me, do you know who you look like?" "Yes, Paul Newman." These poor ladies looked at each other, looked at Dave and I, looked at Pork again, and walked away. But that was Pork's sense of humor.
Yeah.
He was the most straight-faced, hilarious comedian, but you had to pay attention, even if you were poor or you missed the punchline.
Yep.
He was just that good at it. And I'd have loved to have sat in on an IRS interview with somebody when he was doing an audit for him.
I grew up less than half a mile as the crow flies from Charlie Hill's garage in Wrightsville. I was back in Agawam Road. I mean, if I walked down, it was less than half a mile. But I used to hear him fire the engines up. This was when I was still a kid. I used to ride my bicycle down there and stuff. And then when I got to be 15, I bought my first car, my old 41 Ford, for $100.
It was a lot of money.
You better believe it. I mowed grass all summer to buy that son of a bitch. I still got it. And, and I'd ride down and got to know Charlie. And actually, Charlie and Bob Palmer, who raced Drove Bad Habit, he was a welder and stuff. They actually made some parts, because you couldn't buy speed equipment for stuff like that back. He made some parts that still have them on the car yet, and he's gone, but it's just sentimental. It's kind of neat, to have that. God, that was 55 years ago. Holy shit, where'd it go? But I just want to throw that in.
Pork has two sons, right?
Yeah, Greg, and I'm not good with names. What's her name?
My understanding is, and my brother and I in a previous life used to play in a metal band. And Gary was a guitar player, very good guitar player, and I was the drummer. And their sons were also playing in a band around the same time. It was Pork's sons.
Yeah.
Both of those guys played in a rock band. I forget what instrument each one of them played, but they were on the circuit at the same time we were.
Yeah. Pork had a guitar shop in Hanover.
What was the name of the guitar shop? Do you remember?
I'm doing good remembering his name.
I'm doing good remembering that I played drums.
Pork was musical, and so it rubbed off on his voice.
Yes.
And he and Robin were good parents.
I don't know that they ever got into cars, but they were good musicians.
The only race car that Pork ever owned, he and Larry Roberts, who Larry wound up driving the Filthy 40 some, had a 32 Chevrolet that was named the Bad News. They built the car, but didn't have a motor and transmission for it. And the U.S. Nationals in Detroit in '59 was coming up, and Larry had a new 57 Chevrolet 274 speed, and he was about a year into the payments on it when they pulled the engine and transmission out and rolled it up beside parents' garage and put the motor and transmission in the Bad News car and went to Detroit and won C Altered. I think they put the motor back in Larry's 57 and sold the car to Bruce Larson. That's the car over there.
That was the original Mr. Clean car.
News car. And it didn't look that good then.
I remember seeing pictures of it when it was called Bad News.
Yeah.
I guess it was some of Jim Amos's videos,
Long
the Beyond
yeah.
video, and he has some pictures of it from way back.
And then Charlie did a full altered that was a Bad News car.
Bad Habit. Bad Habit.
Bad Habit.
Right.
Yeah, Bad Habit.
Right.
And
that-
first it was a Dirty 30, and then then it became.
Dick Smith had
Well,
that
actually,
car.
yes, Scott Hoofnagel now has that
That's the one
car.
Bob Palmer drove.
Yes.
Right. And
See, I remember.
the Dirty 30, that one is actually being restored by Scott Hoofnagel. And it's really, when Smitty had it, it became more of a bracket car. And it still looks like more of a bracket car. It's lowered. It doesn't have a straight axle or
It was
anything
in
like
New
that.
York
But it's
show
around.
a few years ago.
Yep.
Parked
Yes, it
near
was.
us,
In fact, I was parked right next to him in my tube frame car.
Oh, okay.
Years ago. Smitty was in one, they had us lined up almost like we were racing. But the Bad Habit is owned by Bill Leininger, and that car is currently in St. Mary's, Ohio, and it was restored. Mike Guffey had it for a while, and he bought it from Mike Guffey. But it's still around. And actually, before the York show was finished, when Darwin started moving it up here, Bill Leininger brought Bad Habit into that show before the last show or two that they had in York.
Dick Gerber, who's from Lancaster, he's a Vager. He does upholstery work and stuff. And when that car showed up in York, he came in, somebody got Dick and went over, and Dick confirmed that the upholstery in that car, which like snapped in, like tonneau cover snaps, was the original upholstery that he made for that car.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So that car was definitely authentic. But Dick said, yeah, I did that. So that's really neat. Why did you guys buy that?
I'm first in line from Bill. So Bill basically said if he ever decides to sell it, he's calling me first.
It belongs back here, not out there, damn it. It was an East Coast car. It should be here, you know. But that's what happens. They get passed around, moved around. But it's amazing how they resurface over years and stuff. And it's put away in a garage someplace, and somebody dies or gets married or something, and it's for sale. Hopefully, maybe we'll get back here someday. All right, well, I'm getting signals. I'm running out of time here. I mean, this has been a blast and a half. Not bored a second, but does anybody have any question for the guys? Here we go.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, all the gentlemen on the dais today, how many of you have worn spandex pants?
Or wearing.
I think I did.
I'll answer that.
How many what?
How many have worn spandex pants? He doesn't even know what it is. He's too old.
Way back when, in the 80s, we all did some pretty crazy things. And part of being in a heavy metal band was to look the part.
I don't wear any.
But back then there was a look that everybody was after. And so in our previous life, we would go on stage, we had fog machines, we had bombs going off and everything else. And yes, we wore some pretty bizarre stuff. And I'll just leave it at that. But I had a pair of red and black tiger striped spandex pants that, thank God, I sat behind a drum set, and I don't know where they are anymore. But I do know one thing, I'd never fit in them.
Okay, well, I want to thank all you guys for coming up here and putting up with me and Fred.
Also like to thank Jeff for doing a great job as the MC for this thing. Also going to pass one other word of thanks out to EJ Kowalski and his gang over there. One of the things that EJ has been very much involved in is the Vintage Eliminator, and I think that is such a return to the original days of racing, and it is a chance for us all to really relive the past the way that it really was. A chance to sort of get back to that golden age of drag racing, even before it was a golden age. Again, I think what brings most of us here is the nostalgic value, and that's got a heck of a lot of nostalgic value. So thank you, EJ.
Yeah, thank you all for coming and laughing at the appropriate moments. We really all appreciate that.
Once again, I want to thank Fred for bringing the car up. I mean, and then having him as a whatever you want to call him, it's just a riot, So pick up a schedule over here for the rest of the events for the rest of the year. I want to thank you for all coming, and please come back again. And at any time, we're open Friday and Saturday from 10 to 4. Thanks again.
We hope you enjoyed this journey through racing history and the personal stories that keep the spirit of motorsports alive. The Eastern Museum of Motor Racing is a premier destination for motor racing enthusiasts, showcasing a vast collection of historic racing cars, artifacts, and memorabilia. To learn more about the EMMR or to be a part of the next in-person Racers Roundtable, you can plan your visit or support the museum's mission to preserve and celebrate the legacy of racing by heading to www.emmr.org. Follow them on social media for the latest news, upcoming events, and exclusive content. Until next time, keep the engines running and the memories alive.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.